Good morning, everyone. My name is Georgeta Vulpe, and today I would like to present our preliminary results on real-time monitoring of glucose and lactate in human participants and ambulatory conditions using subdermal wearable patches. So the advancement of wearable sensing technology has played a pivotal role in the drive for obtaining real-time continuous data. The main objective was to move from blood monitoring techniques to more minimally invasive methods to make healthcare more accessible. Detection of analytes from the skin interstitial fluid was a really interesting sample model. In our study, we were looking at monitoring level of glucose and lactate in healthy participants with an intake of food and then exercise, and then also monitor any biofouling effects that might have occurred on the surface of our sensor. So to carry out our study, we used two separate subdermal sensors. The patches are inserted in the area between the epidermis and the dermis, very far away from any vasculature, making them both painless and minimally invasive methods. The patches are made out of polycarbonate and have 4 separate areas. The 2 working electrodes and counter electrode is metallized with platinum, while the final section, the reference electrode, was metallized with silver. The patches are then functionalized using phenol and glucose oxidase or lactate oxidase. Oh, apologies. And then they're inserted in the skin. The advantage of using phenol as a functionalization, so it was functionalized using electropolymerization. We used electropolymerization due to the superior diffusion dynamics. And also we chose polyphenol due to their inherent biocompatibility with the skin and also their ability to mitigate any inflammatory response. So the study was done in preparation of a wider human study. The results presented will be based on 1 participant wearing the device over 3 days. The performance of the patch were compared to a continuous glucose monitor and the capillary blood sampling. In the image, you can see one of our participants wearing one of the CGM device, along with the subdermal wearable patches, which are connected by the wires. So this is during one of the exercise trial. So in terms of the study schedule, the data was captured over 3 days during the exercise trial. Prior to this, the participant underwent a 3-day pre-evaluation. Firstly, we determined eligibility for the study. In this case, we are looking at healthy participants with no prior health condition and a good fitness level. Once the eligibility was confirmed, we looked at sensor tolerability, which is assessed based on a visual analog scale to score the pain perceived compared to CGM and capillary blood sampling. Following this, we also inspected the site where we applied the sensor to make sure that there's no reaction occurring. And the final test involved tailoring an exercise trial based on the estimated maximum heart rate. After that, the actual trial started on day 1 with a low glycemic index meal, and then in the afternoon, a low to moderate intensity treadmill exercise. Day 2 and 3 had a high glycemic index meal, and then in the afternoon, either a high intensity cycling exercise or a high interval cycling exercise. So to assess the clinical accuracy in terms of how our device performed compared to both CGM and capillary data, we used 3 different parameters. Firstly, the assessment was done using the Clark error grid, which was used basically to quantify the clinical accuracy of our sensor. After that, we plotted the MARD values, which was used to calculate the difference between a reference measurement and the data obtained from our sensor. The lower the MARD value, usually the better agreement between your reference and your sensor. And we also excluded any data based on the malfunction of our sensor or potential stats, just to make sure the analysis is quite tight. So before we capture that data in vivo on human participants, we also did a bit of in vitro optimization, where we used platinum screen printed electrodes to test the sensor response at different glucose concentration. we found that the response was quite good, between a range between 0 to 30 millimolar. And then based on that, we also did the dose response curve. And we found that the sensor follows the Michaelis-Menten equation, which was expected due to the response originating from an enzymatic reaction. The apparent Km value was obtained to be approximately 6.8 millimolar, which is really good agreement with previous reports. Based on that, we found that our sensor would perform similarly in real condition in the ISF. We also did a bit of surface characterization between bare and functionalized surfaces. We found that there are several variations in terms of surface morphology between bare and electropolymerized surface. So we found that the glucose oxidase and lactate oxidase surface have these elongated structures with varying lengths and diameters. The electropolymerized glucose oxidase is characterized by a conformal coating, which we believe could indicate a good coverage of the enzyme, while the lactate oxidase shows a sharper three-dimensional morphology, which could indicate a good enzymatic activity. In terms of the setup that was used for in vivo study, you can see the subdermal patch, which I was describing earlier on. We can see the printed circuit board, which is attached on the back of our sensor, and also the cable, which was connecting the different working electrodes. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the portable potentiostat, which was used during the human study, and then the tablet, which was capturing this real-time continuous data. In terms of the skin tolerability, you can see here the skin effect during different stages of post-removal of our device. The first image illustrates the mark left immediately post-removal. There is no sign of erythema or irritation that occurred at the site. 12 hours post-removal, you can see that the marks have significantly diminished. And then we found that in the 24-hour window, the marks seem to completely disappear, indicating a really good tolerance. So in terms of the sensor response, on the left-hand side, you can see the glucose monitoring data plotted on a biaxial plot where we plotted current, glucose concentration against time. The current peaks coincide with both CGM and capillary blood sampling, showing good potential for commercial application. Furthermore, we noted that our subdermal sensor captures better the postprandial peak compared to the CGM, as our values are closer to that capillary blood sampling. On the right-hand side, you can see the data obtained for lactate monitor on triaxial plot. So here we looked at current, lactate concentration, and gas exchange over time. You can see that there's an increase in lactate concentration with physical exercise, which is expected due to lactate production from glycolysis. There is also an increase in the production of carbon dioxide and consumption of oxygen with an increase in lactate, which was expected. So the Clark grid arrow also showed really promising results in terms of the clinical accuracy. When the subdermal data was plotted against the CGM device, all of the data points were distributed in zone A and B. Similarly, when we plotted our data compared to the capillary blood sampling, the data points are still in zone A and B. You can see that there's fewer data points when we compare the subdermal patch to capillary blood sampling. So this is due to lower sampling of the capillary blood, which was done basically every half an hour to capture postprandial peaks, and then every hour for the rest of the study. But because the distribution of the points is in zone A and B, we can deem that our device is clinically acceptable. The MARD values also confirmed this. When we compared our sensor to the CGM device, the MARD value obtained was 16.6%. Furthermore, when we compared it to capillary blood sampling, this value was obtained to be 13.8%. We interestingly wanted to compare the CGM with the capillary blood sampling, and the MARD value was obtained to be 15.4%. As I mentioned before, we also wanted to look a little bit into the biofouling effect and investigate it. For those of you who aren't aware, so biofouling is a process which is caused by the adhesion of proteins on the surface of the sensor. Since our glucose monitoring patch was left for 3 days in the skin interstitial fluid, we expect that there's a decrease in the postprandial peak. which we think could be attributed to the addition of both albumin and fibrinogen on the surface of the sensor. You can see from the data on the first day, the current was observed to be 0.18 microamps, while on the second day, the current drastically dropped to 0.14 microamps. We've seen that the current seems to apparently stabilize on phase 3, where it was obtained to be 0.13 microamps. We do believe that this could happen because of the biofouling effect, although a more robust study is required to really understand the mechanism behind this decrease and behind the biofouling. So to conclude, we have manufactured and functionalized a glucose and lactate sensor, which has been shown to be functional in human volunteers. We have seen that all the data points were in zone A and B of the Clark-Gris error, showing a good clinical value for our sensor. But we also observed some biofouling that occurred over the 3 days of wearing our sensor. In terms of the future improvement, we would recommend moving away from electropolymerization because we believe it's not very scalable as a process. And we would recommend moving to immobilizing enzyme using hydrogels, which not only are more scalable, but they can just be drop casted on your surface and could improve the functionality of the sensors. I would also like to acknowledge all the following people who were part of our study, and also Sanjiv Sharma for conducting this study with us. And thank you very much for your attention.